U.S. President Donald Trump greets and shakes hands with Russian President Vladimir Putin ahead of a tense summit in Alaska on August 15th. In Alaska, Mr. Trump stepped off Air Force One and waited for Mr. Putin on the tarmac. The two leaders then greeted each other and smiled. U.S. F-22 fighter jets were positioned on either side of the red carpet. The next meeting between the two delegations could determine whether a ceasefire in Ukraine can be reached. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who was not invited to the talks, and his European allies are concerned about the outcome of the meeting. Mr. Trump sought to allay those concerns as he boarded Air Force One, saying he would let Ukraine decide on any possible territorial swap. "I'm not here to negotiate for Ukraine. I'm here to bring them to the table," he said. In a departure from the original plan, Trump will be joined by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy to Russia Steve Witkoff for the meeting with Putin. At the larger bilateral meeting that follows, Trump will also be joined by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. Meanwhile, Russian officials accompanying Putin in talks with the U.S. delegation will be Foreign Policy Advisor Yuri Ushakov and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Russian envoy Kirill Dmitriev described the atmosphere ahead of the summit as tense and said the two leaders would discuss not just Ukraine, but the entire bilateral relationship. Trump, who has vowed to end Russia's war in Ukraine within 24 hours, later admitted that this was a more difficult task than expected. He said that if the Alaska talks go well, it would be important to quickly arrange a trilateral summit. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said a trilateral summit was entirely possible if the Alaska talks, which could last 6 to 7 hours, produced results. The talks between U.S. President Trump and Russian President Putin lasted more than 2.5 hours, the longest face-to-face meeting between the two leaders, surpassing the previous summit in Helsinki in 2018. Speaking after the meeting, President Vladimir Putin described the talks as constructive and useful, held in an atmosphere of mutual respect. Russia is genuinely interested in ending the conflict in Ukraine and ensuring a lasting solution for Ukraine, Putin said. President Putin said he could confirm that if Trump were U.S. president in 2022, there would be no conflict in Ukraine. U.S. President Donald Trump said the two leaders had a very productive meeting, discussing many issues, but no agreement had yet been reached. However, he affirmed that the delegations of the two countries had made significant progress and stressed that he had a very good relationship with Russian President Putin. Before boarding the plane, Russian President Vladimir Putin laid flowers at the graves of Soviet soldiers at the Fort Richardson Memorial Cemetery. The Kremlin said the graves commemorate Soviet pilots and sailors who died transporting equipment from the United States to the Soviet Union during World War II. Useful, constructive talks. Speaking at a press conference, President Vladimir Putin described the talks as constructive and useful, held in an atmosphere of mutual respect. The situation in Ukraine involves fundamental threats to Russia's security, Putin said. While Russia is interested in ending what is happening in Ukraine, we believe that in order to solve the problem in a lasting and sustainable way, it is necessary to eliminate all the roots, the main causes of that conflict. President Vladimir Putin. The talks were constructive and useful. President Putin said he could confirm that if Trump were president of the United States in 2022, there would be no conflict in Ukraine. In response, U.S. President Donald Trump said the two leaders had a very productive meeting, discussing many issues, but no agreement had yet been reached. However, he affirmed that the delegations of the two countries had made significant progress and emphasized that he had a very good relationship with President Putin. President Donald Trump. President Putin also wants to end this conflict. President Trump noted that the most important thing is that the parties have a good chance of achieving peace, and he expressed hope to meet Mr. Putin again soon. According to Mr. Trump, the Russian president also wants to end this conflict like him. Speaking in English, Russian President Putin invited Mr. Trump to Moscow for the next round of negotiations. Mr. Trump replied that it could happen.